This call is now being recorded.
Hi, this is Ayanthi Gunawardana with BuddhaSport.com in the Spirit of Combat, and today I'm on the phone with Chris Brennan. For those of you who don't know, Chris Brennan, also known as the Westside Strangler, fought in the really early UFCs. We're talking like UFC 16. He's a big grappler. He's competed in the Abu Dhabi World Championships. And for those who also don't know, he founded the popular Nogi company, Nogi Industries. So we're going to talk to him a little bit about, his history and the martial arts and things like that. So, Chris, how are you today?
I'm doing awesome, thank you. How are you?
Pretty good. So tell us how you first got involved in grappling and the martial arts.
Well, kind of the same route as many people. I was watching the first UFC. I was actually bouncing at a club with a couple of other UFC fighters, or soon-to-be UFC fighters, and saw the first UFC on TV, saw Royce, submitting everyone, thought that was crazy, and sought out a jiu-jitsu instructor and started training. And probably within a year and a half of that time, I ended up at the Gracie Academy training with Royce for years after that.
And so you were is this in California where you started?
Yeah. I was living in California, and their school was in Torrance, so it was kind of ironic. They were from Brazil, and I had no idea when I had seen the UFC and it was talking about them being from Brazil, but they actually were located in California at the time, so it worked out really well.
Now, how'd you go from, you saw those early UFCs and you saw Royce beating everyone. How'd you go from, watching it on TV to actually fighting and competing in the promotion?
Well, I was born in Compton, California. I grew up around there and in Huntington Beach, and I fought a lot. Like, I had a lot of street fights. So, and then bouncing at bars and stuff, we end up in a lot of altercations as well. So when we saw the UFC come on TV, I was ecstatic. I was like, these guys are getting paid, they're not getting arrested, and they're able to fight and get paid for it. So I thought it was, right up my alley. I went in the first place I went in, I was kind of, I don't know about arrogant, but I was quite confident they weren't going to be able to do anything to me, and I walked in and got strangled and my arms ripped off in 30 seconds. And then I for sure knew that I wanted to learn and do it, so it was, but it was, I instantly, as soon as I saw it, I wanted to do it. I wanted to fight in the next UFC, and I was with Chemo and Todd Medina, and I was just a lot smaller than they were. So by UFC 3, Chemo was in, and by UFC 5, Todd was in, and because they were much bigger, and I was trying, but I didn't get in until 16 because of being so much smaller.
So tell us what it was like, fighting at UFC 16. This is before Zuffa, Dana White, and the Fertitta brothers took it over. It was still, people weren't training all the styles. It was still very much style versus style. So tell us about that. Yeah,
it was awesome, to be honest. I loved when it was different styles. It really separated everybody, and now you watch and kind of like watching every single fight's the same fight. They're different sizes, but everyone's fighting kind of the same way. And I thought it was awesome back then because everybody's style was different. Everybody had a different goal or agenda in the fight. And like when I fought in the UFC, I had trained a little boxing, getting ready for the fight, and I'd wrestled a little bit, getting ready for the fight, but I wasn't a boxer and I wasn't a wrestler. I was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, and that was what I was good at. Like, that was my strength as a UFC fighter. I was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, and that was what I was good at. So it was definitely different. If you're a blue belt in jiu-jitsu now, you better be, you better have pro boxing or Muay Thai hands and college wrestling, but it was just, it was different for sure. But I liked it a lot.
Okay. So I know you went 1-1 in the UFC, and then you were fighting outside the UFC, and you came back and fought. I think it was UFC 35, correct?
Yes, that was, I think, the first or second show for Zuffa. I knew they had just taken over right before that.
Okay, so at that point it was Zuffa owned?
Yes.
Okay, so what was the difference from fighting
both companies.
So what was the difference, you know, like, I mean, UFC 35 is still pretty early in the UFC timeline, but would you say there's a big difference from when you first fought to UFC 35?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, I mean, even though everything's changed now, Dana definitely had the same goals at the time, so everyone was getting taken care of, you know, as far as, you know, they were treating everyone, you know, pretty well. I mean, financially wasn't to be honest, I made more money in UFC 16 than I did in UFC 35, but it's probably because I fought twice in one night at UFC 16. But it was different. We were put up a little bit nicer, and I don't know. There was better fighters on the card as well. You know, by that time it had changed so much, and there had been a lot of high level guys coming into the sport, and there was some good guys on my UFC 35 card for sure.
So throughout your MMA career, you know, like you were a blue belt in jiu-jitsu when you first started. You had the little bit of boxing and wrestling, and so, you know, after UFC 16 or throughout, were you continuing to train as much in all three? Would you say you mainly focused on jiu-jitsu? What was that like?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was always, from the beginning, I was a jiu-jitsu guy. Like, I got hooked on jiu-jitsu right off the bat. But I focused a lot on my Muay Thai and my wrestling, getting ready for fights, because I had a few losses at the beginning of my career that came from not having wrestling, you know, from a better wrestler taking me down, holding me down, and losing the decision, like Pat Miletich, you know. I couldn't get out from under that guy, but he couldn't do anything to me from the top, but he'd win, you know, judge's decision because of his wrestling. We had a 20-minute draw, a 30-minute one-round split decision loss to me. Like, it was just, I knew at the time that I needed to work on my wrestling. So I definitely cross-trained in wrestling and Muay Thai the whole time, but always continued my jiu-jitsu path because I wanted to get my black belt, and I wanted to compete on the, you know, the big stages of grappling as well.
So speaking about, you know, going on the big stage and grappling, tell us about some of the tournaments you've been in, some of the biggest tournaments you've been in.
Well, to be honest, because of my MMA background, like, I always wanted to fight, you know, so I was always fighting. I got invited to do 80cc on short notice and did it. Never trained for it. I was just training, you know, doing my regular jiu-jitsu training and MMA training. And of course, my first draw was Marcelo Garcia. And it was, you know, to be honest, it was a good experience. I would have liked, there was probably 5 guys in that division, 4 or 5 guys in that division that I'm quite confident I would have beat. And I had to get him first. I would have liked to fight him, but I'd like to fight somebody else first. And I got injured. You know, I got my ribs separated, and I was out for over a year after that match. And it sucked. You know, I think I've only have probably 14 grappling matches total. But since I retired from MMA a year ago, I've focused 100% on training for grappling tournaments, jiu-jitsu, and I'll be competing very soon and in a couple of big tournaments.
Upcoming tournaments, will you be doing the 2013 ADCC in China?
That's my goal.
Okay.
I'm hoping so. I've been in contact, so we'll see what happens. That's the plan, though. And at 41, I'm 41 years old right now. My jiu-jitsu and my wrestling is better than it's ever been. Like, physically and timing and speed and strength is better than it's ever been.
So now you've been fighting, you know, like your last MMA fight was in 2012, and I think your first fight was in 1996. So that's a pretty long, you know, career in MMA. What do you think kept you motivated throughout? Because, you know, you started when there was such little support from MMA and there was such little structure. What kept you going that whole time?
Jiu-jitsu, to be honest. I think, you know, owning my schools. I own the next generation MMA schools, and that's kept me traveling, training with good guys, you know, doing seminars, always wanting to fight and being able to be physically able to fight. I was never injured throughout my whole career until about 4 years ago I got injured with my ribs with Marcelo, but that is the injury that continued with me for the rest of my career. Like any time I was hurt after that, it was my ribs. And it took a long, long time to recover. And then I was out for a year after that, and then there was another time after that I was out for one more year, and that led to getting ready for my last two fights and getting in shape and being healthy and my ribs being completely recovered and everything like that. So I think just training smart, doing a lot of jiu-jitsu. I swim a lot, just stuff to stay in shape and the drive. I wanted to do it no matter what, and I wasn't I think as you asked me that question, I'm thinking back of other fighters who started back then who aren't doing anything, and I think they probably, trained a little overboard or supplemented a little overboard or, whatever the case may be. But I always felt like I could compete. I always felt like I was in shape or good enough or fast and strong enough to compete. So, I didn't even want to retire when I did, but because I felt like I was at a high physically and mentally and I had 2 wins, I didn't want to be like a lot of guys and stick it out a little longer than I should have until I was losing and not happy with the sport. I was pumped on the sport and excited, so I just wanted to go out with a smile on my face instead of regretting anything I had done.
Okay, and you fought, some really big names. You mentioned you fought Pat Miletich, you fought Joe Stevenson, you fought Vitor Shaolin-Ribeiro. What do you think was, your toughest or most challenging fight in MMA?
It's hard to say. I fought I never ever turned a fight down. I always fought the best guys that I could fight because I knew I could always beat the guys who were the gatekeepers. I was always wanted to be the guy fighting for the top spot. And sometimes I came out on top, sometimes it didn't. And to be honest, it didn't matter to me as long as I was fighting and doing the best that I could against the best guys. And like when I fought Miletich, it was my 4th fight. He was ranked number 1 or 4 or something in the world. And his 24th fight, it was my 4th. But I just wanted to fight the best guys that I could. So Miletich was always one of the hardest for me just because he was not super exciting and he wanted to take you out of your game, and he was very, very good at it. And my style was 100 miles an hour. I'm either going to beat you in the first round or you're going to beat me. I'm going after you. And I didn't focus a lot on what's going to happen in the second round, what's going to happen in the third round, because I was going for the finish. I was always going for the finish, and I risked it for that, but sometimes, again, like I said, come out on top, sometimes you don't. And I guess Pat was probably the toughest as far as not being able to do much to him. My funnest fight would be Gomi. Like, that's a fight I'll always remember as my favorite fight. I lost that fight on a decision. And a lot of people, including me, think if it was to happen here in the States, I would have won that fight. But it was just, to me, it was an exciting, fun fight because so much happened during the fight.
Now, you said you started training jiu-jitsu was it with Royce Gracie, you said?
Well, I started with Ken Gabrielson. He was a black belt from Helson Gracie, and I was only there for a little bit, and I had found out that Royce was, just up the freeway a little bit, and then I went to Royce's and trained there. Then I was there for a while, went to Brazil, lived there for a year, trained for a while down there, and then was back at the Gracie Academy again in Torrance.
So now, you have your own school. Are you at a Gracie-affiliated school? What's your relationship like with the Gracie family now?
No, going all the way back to 1998, right after that UFC, I took the winnings from that money, opened up my first school. I had been teaching in my garage as it was. I was driving to the Gracie Academy and training, but I was teaching out of my garage as a blue belt and opened my first school as a blue belt. And it was Next Generation MMA in 98. And from that point on, I've always had my own schools and no affiliation to anybody. As a 4-stripe blue belt, I never had any more affiliation with anybody. So I had been training to get promoted. John De La O was a black belt also from Helson Gracie, and he gave me my purple, brown, and my black. And then going back, because I couldn't get IBJJF certified because he wasn't, I went and trained and had been training with Frangina, who's the owner of Paragon, and I trained with him in Brazil as well, so we knew each other very well. And went back through him, got my black belt from him, and certified under him now through the IBJJF. The problem was at the time, I never put a gi back on. I took the gi off to get ready for the UFC, and I never put the gi back on. There was a day at the Gracie Academy as a blue belt. There was some purple and brown belts who were better than me, obviously, coming up with a gi on, who would submit me once in a while and whatnot. And one day Hoist came in and said, let's take off the gis and go with open hand slaps, let's do some MMA stuff. So we did, and without talking shit, I beat up everybody. Like, all my jiu-jitsu improved, my hands improved. Like, all of a sudden I was just a completely different person when I took the gi off, and it just was so natural to me. So from that day forward, I only put it on in a few classes when I had to there, and then I never put it on again after that. So from 4-stripe blue belt on, I never wore a gi again, and that was where the hard part of being promoted and being affiliated with anybody came in, and I want to do my own thing anyway, so that's what I ended up doing.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about what made you start No-Gi Industries, because that's one of the oldest, I think, grappling companies around, at least to my knowledge. So tell us a little bit what got you started with No-Gi and the progression of the company.
That was kind of what started it. Me, not having a gi on. I had been sponsored, like my very first sponsor was Tap Out. And then, I don't know, I can't even remember what happened there. I ended up, being sponsored by Hitman. Dan from Hitman was sponsoring me. And I had been talking to him, and he was very cool about giving me, like, this guy, he was making Tap Out's clothes, he was making Sprawl's clothes, he was making everybody's clothes, as well as owning Hitman, but he was getting all their stuff made, and no one really knew that. And I had been talking to him the whole time, he was helping me kind of come up with ideas and stuff for me to do my own fight company, or my own fight gear company. And all along, he ended up getting 300 pair of shorts that he didn't like the color of, because they were all into their black and tough guy stuff with Hitman and Tap Out type stuff, and they were blue. These were like navy blue shorts, and I loved the shorts. So I bought the shorts from him. They were blanks, had all my stuff. One step back. As I was wanting to open a company or start a company, my buddy Jeremy, who I'd been best friends with for years, we had been going back and forth trying to come up with a name, and he's like, dude, No-Gi. He goes, that's what everyone knows you for, No-Gi, they know you for that. And I was like, oh shit, that's a great name, And so we kind of bounced back and forth and ended up with No-Gi Industries, and I bought those shorts from Dan, had all my stuff embroidered on them, bought the website, and literally within 16 to 1,800 bucks, we had the company. Like, that's what I was put into it, from buying the shorts to buying the website to, just all minor stuff. Less than $2,000, we were rolling.
That's awesome. You guys are like one of the first, like, pure grappling brands, because it's not just MMA. You see a lot of people at, IBJJF tournaments wearing the No-Gi ranked rash guards and the shorts and all that.
Oh yeah, as far as like grappling goes, we were definitely the first company, and like at the Worlds, when they first started making you wear the rank stuff, we were the only ones that had them. So that first year, No-Gi made a killing at that tournament, and it wasn't like we came up with the rule; they did, and we just happened to have them. So it worked out really well. It's a super cool company. It's way more sporty than your regular tough guy, MMA type clothing, and it's stuff that you can wear all over the place, not just while you're training.
Now, you told me that you had sold the company to, I think, Budo Videos. So what led you to eventually selling the company?
I was really busy. You know, I was training for fights. My son was racing motocross. We were traveling all over the United States, and having my school as well. And I just didn't have the time to put into the company that it needed. And I loved it, and I did not want it to, you know, fizzle out. I didn't want it to not do well, or to go away. And I can't remember what I was doing with Budo Videos. I knew I done videos with them, but they had asked something while we were doing videos or something. They just straight up offered to buy it. And, I didn't like at first what they had said, what they had offered, so it kind of blew it off. And then a few months later, it came down the line again, and we started talking about it again, and it had improved. So we ended up making a deal and selling it. And I'm still involved, but I sold it to those guys. Yeah, the guys that know Budo Videos.
Now, I don't know if this was before or after you sold it, but I believe a lot of the Nogi stuff is now made in America. Was that your doing, or is that Budo Videos?
It was a little bit of both. That's where they came in. We had a long talking discussion with each other before they had taken over, and I wanted to make sure that the quality was going to stay, you know, as good, and the quality was going to be, you know, very good. And I was getting a lot of stuff made overseas because Dan from Hitman had given me a lot of contacts, and I had made stuff happen over there. And in the meantime, these guys were already getting some of their stuff produced over here. The Budo Videos guys were getting stuff produced over here for their Budo stuff, for I forget which gi company owned, but they owned a gi company, and they also produced all the gear for Gracie Baja, their gis, their shirts, their shorts, everything. So they already had a good connection over here, so that was most likely where that big transition took place, where a lot of the stuff ended up being made here.
Okay, and
a lot easier getting it made here.
So now, were you part of the process in like so they already had their setup, you know, you didn't have to go and find a lot of the factories, but they already had it all set up?
Yes. Yeah, I gave them, in the process of selling it, I gave them the contacts of all of my people as well that I was getting stuff through. And I believe they stuck to some of it, but they still had, they had their own connections as well. And that's what, they ended up holding on to, I believe, using the same ones they already had.
That's been a big, you know, topic lately in terms of, you know, bringing jobs back to America and getting the economy running again. People have been starting to go for more made in America things. And in terms of jiu-jitsu, I feel like a lot of people probably don't know that most of the Nogi stuff is made in America. I don't know if you've heard of the gi company Origin, but they're the first gi company to now have all their gis made in the United States.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, right, is that production costs can be pretty high for stuff made in the U.S.
It definitely can, that's for sure. The shipping gets expensive when you're shipping it back from overseas. It's a pricey deal, but it still ends up being less than it is if you get it made here, for sure. But the quality is usually better if you get it made here as well. Plus, if there's something wrong with it, you can go right back to the company and get it handled.
Okay. So now let's see. Your school, tell us a little bit about your school. Is it more grappling oriented? Is it like a true MMA gym? Tell us a little bit about it.
My schools have actually just been doing so well. When I first moved to Texas, I didn't have a school for probably 5 years. I was just doing privates. I was involved with my son racing motocross, so I was doing strength conditioning training for a bunch of motocross guys, and kind of let it. I wasn't busy with it at all. I didn't have my own. I had all my affiliates, but I didn't have my own. And my guys in the UK who own Next Generation Liverpool were just blowing it up over there. You know, they were putting people in the UFC. They were winning all the fights over there, and kind of kept everything afloat until I started my headquarters school here about 2 years ago. And in that time, we've now just got tons of students. I have every person that's walked in here who's been to all the other top schools in the United States say this is the nicest school they've ever walked into. It's a beautiful school. I have another one 2 hours from here that all my brothers teach at. I moved them all out here from California that they teach at this school down here in Waco now. And I end up with hundreds and hundreds of students and didn't have very many fighters or people that wanted to fight. So I put a thing on the internet having an open tryout for our fight team, and I ended up with somewhere between 30 and 40 people coming in from all over the United States for a tryout that took place over 7 hours, and I ended up picking 16 guys throughout. Some of them were already from my school, but I made even my own students go through this tryout, and I picked 16 guys, and now we have a full fight team that now that I'm not fighting, I can focus on, and we're putting guys, in legacy fights here in Texas and in Bellator, and one of the kids, Matt Lozano, already fights for Bellator. So our goal is to start getting guys in the UFC and just start being regular faces in the UFC and working, to do that. At the same time, I have some really high level grapplers, and like we've only been open 2 years, but our first tournament was 6 months in. We did a grappler, a Naga. We showed up with 25 guys, won 18 gold medals, 25 medals, and every tournament we've entered since then has been the same way. Like we go in there and put it down. So I'm excited. We have some guys doing Europa in 2 weeks, and just trying to get into bigger and better things. We have a lot of new guys because the school's not that old, but within the next year, we're going to be on the map in a lot of different ways. And I'm excited. Now,
do you teach mainly gi or no gi, or is it a mix of both?
No gi. I don't have any. One of my students, Josh, a black belt from me, he teaches gi on Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon, and that's it. The rest of the classes are all no gi classes. But because of my jiu-jitsu background, I still rank. I still belt white through black. I still go through the same type of curriculum. I just have a different style and approach to my teaching and grips and handles and stuff on the ground without the gi on. It's not just like take off the gi and go. It's a slightly different style, but it's jiu-jitsu.
Now, speaking of jiu-jitsu competition and grappling competition, there's been a lot of talk. People say that the IBJJF rules are too restrictive and it's becoming more of a points game. What are your thoughts on some of the rules in a lot of the new grappling tournaments and the way that grappling is going?
To be honest, I don't know a ton about the rules that have changed or whatever. I know that with my kids competing, there are some strange rules. What I definitely don't like the way that people are grappling, like some of the positions that they're getting in and sitting in, and I don't know, it's like drives me crazy. And whether it works or not, I guess we'll find out, because I'm going to come in with my style and they can do their style, and we'll see how it goes, because it's definitely not, a lot of it's definitely not entertaining to watch.
And to backtrack a little bit about your school, you said you started teaching when you were a 4-stripe blue belt, and,
yeah.
Having students and stuff. How did you balance, competing in MMA and teaching and having your own sets of students?
Yeah, I taught at a pretty fast pace. So one of my students, Jeremy Williams, he assisted a lot anytime that I was fighting or anytime I was doing anything, so I could help kind of balance it out. But I was juggling for sure. I was teaching, training, doing my, everything. I was also married with kids. Like, I was doing everything I could all at the same time. So sometimes had a lot on my plate, but, it worked. I made it work.
Okay. So sounds like you've juggled a lot in your career, from being like one of the first guys to fight, in like the early UFCs, starting your own school, doing all these grappling tournaments, and then, possibly or definitely coming back to grappling tournaments. So you've had a very full career, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Well, here's the thing. Coming into starting MMA or jiu-jitsu, I was definitely not on a good path. I was, I didn't graduate high school. I wasn't like, I did drugs when I was young, 14, 15, 16 years old. I was just doing, I was going all the wrong directions. And then I stopped doing that, started bodybuilding, but it wasn't like I wasn't doing anything that was going to take me anywhere. You know, I was just kind of floating around, fucking off being an idiot, and then saw this sport and sat down with myself basically and put together a plan. And there was no way that I wasn't going to succeed at it. There was no way. I could have stayed maybe and focused 100% on fighting and been great at fighting, or I could have focused 100% on being a teacher and been great at teaching. But I wanted to do all these different things, and there was no way I wasn't going to make it. And everything I went after, man, I went after it 1,000% to make sure that it succeeded. And so far, you know, everything, you know, give or take a little bit, everything has worked out.
That's awesome that things have worked out so well for you. And also, you know, since you've been in MMA from almost day one and you're still involved in, you know, the coaching aspect up to now, what do you think about the direction of, you know, MMA and the way fights are playing out? You know, I know there have been some judging controversies and things like that.
That's another thing, kind of like, you know, when I was mentioning earlier about every fight looks the same, I think that now people are training too much of actual MMA and not enough Muay Thai, not enough Jiu-jitsu, not enough wrestling, but they're doing it all as one sport and not getting great at anything. And I think that is a problem, and that's why the fights are looking the way they are. But then you'll have guys like Damian Maia who I believe is definitely not training like that, and he's making it clear when he gets in the octagon. There's the guys who are great at certain things and are getting better at the other things. Those are the guys to me that are standing out, the guys who are learning each aspect separately and not just going out there and swinging for the fences. They get taken down, they fight for their life to get back to their feet. You know, the same fight happens over and over and over again. And that's, I mean, the judges definitely suck, but it's got to be hard for the judges when they watch the same thing all the time. So I definitely think that, and I think that's what's going to separate my guys when they start getting in the cage here soon, is they're going to be good on the ground. They're going to be good on the feet. And they're going to be good at wrestling. It's not going to just be the style of MMA. There's definitely, MMA is definitely a style now. And I think that is not a great, it might be a good thing to win by points, but that's why some of these fights aren't being finished anymore. You know, that's why you can look back at 2 or 3 of the title holders right now who haven't finished a fight in 6, 7 fights, you know. And I know it's because the guys that are fighting are good, but it's also because they are fighting to the next round and to the next round and to the next round and not trying to finish the fight like I believe that they could.
Well,
and these guys are preparing for 5-round fights for, you know, expecting to go 5 rounds. Well, get in shape to go 5 rounds if you have to, but try and finish the fight. You know, go out to finish the fight.
I think that's a really cool way to, like, that MMA is now a style and they're kind of jack of all trades, master of none. Would you say that's a correct?
100%.
Well, I'm excited to see what some of your guys are going to bring to the table, because it sounds like they're going to have a bit more of an exciting style. They're going to, you know, bring something new to the table, or bring back, in a way, something old and, like, repackaging it.
Exactly.
So, is there anything else you want to tell us about you or the school, your fight career, before we end the interview?
2 weeks ago, I went to California, and my kids competed in the Kids Jiu-Jitsu World Championships, and they both won the gold medal.
Well, congrats to them. We'll be sure to look out for them. How old are they?
My kids, they're 11 and 13, and they never trained my whole career. They were never into it. They were never stepped on a mat until a year and 8 months ago when I opened this school here in Frisco, Texas. And I told them since they were going into junior high, they needed to start training a little bit just for self-defense reasons. And they got on the mat and have never got off since. They've been in every kids, every adult, every wrestling, every class. And in a year and 8 months, they have been 2-time Texas State champions, now world champions each, Grappler Quest champions, Naga champion. My one son's had 7 Naga swords already in the last year and 8 months. They just have taken to it like me and are very athletic and very good. And I can't wait to see where they go with this because they couldn't have better training. Here in my school in Frisco, Texas, I teach all the jiu-jitsu. Kendall Cross, who's a U.S. Olympic gold medalist, is our wrestling coach, and Master Tong, who was the alpha male head coach, is our head Muay Thai coach here now. So it's just we got a very well-rounded program here.
That must be really awesome for you to see your kids, take to grappling like a fish to water.
Yeah, that's why I took those last 2 fights in 2012. They'd never seen me fight live, and they got to come walk out and fight or watch me fight at those last 2 fights and see me fight live, and that was very special to me. So, and to them, so they now got to witness it, and now they just train every day and enjoy it like I do, except they started at 10 and 11. I started at 21, so I can't imagine where they're going to be by the time they're 21.
All right. Well, thank you so much for, taking the time to speak with me today. I wasn't following UFC 16 when it came out, but when I started following MMA 10 years ago, I made it a point to look at the old ones, and I remember some of your old fights, so it was really cool to get the chance to speak with you and get some insight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the whole deal, the interview and everything. Thank you.
All right, and I'll shoot you an email once it's all. I gotta type it up and post it, but I'll let you know when it's up.
Okay. It was nice talking to you.
All right, good talking to you too. Thank you so much.
All right, see you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.